My name is Nina Marino, and I'm the Director of the Office of Child and Family Services at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I would like to welcome you all to the 2021 Children's Mental Health Awareness Day celebration. You are the caregivers, advocates, parents, and policymakers who work every day to care for and improve the lives of children. The National Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration sets aside the first Thursday in May to emphasize that positive mental health is essential for child's healthy development from birth through young adulthood. This day gives us the opportunity to renew our commitment to prevention of mental health issues before they develop in children, intervening as early as possible with children who might be at risk of adverse childhood events, traumatic stress, or other developmental factors. And we know that 1 out of every 5 children experiences a mental health issue in any given year, and 1 out of 10 of those children will have a severe mental health issue. But when treated, children and adolescents with mental health problems fare better at home, in school, and in their communities. And yet we know that 75 to 80% of children and adolescents in need of services do not receive them due to a myriad of factors. Those include things like stigma, lack of access, and difficulty navigating a complex and confusing service delivery system. One of our greatest challenges is the inconsistent array of services across the Commonwealth that is often based on zip code. We're working to address the access and consistency of services by creating a standardized continuum of quality behavioral health services for children and adolescents across the state. The Systems Transformation, Excellence and Performance in Virginia, or STEP VA, is one such initiative with our public mental health system that requires uniform access to critical services across the state, along with same-day access, primary care integration, and care navigation. We're also working closely with our Medicaid agency to create new services that Medicaid will pay for that are specifically targeted at keeping children in their homes and communities, which we know is best for families. And other areas of progress include improved access to crisis services through mobile crisis, which allows us to come to wherever the family would like at the frequency and schedule to meet the family's needs in order to intervene in crisis situations earlier on. We're working on evidence-based practices for treatment, which will increase the involvement of families and children in the treatment process by giving the families more voice and choice, and increasing things like family and youth peer support partners in treatment. And over the past couple of years, we've partnered with pediatricians and family practice doctors from across the state to enhance the training that they receive in behavioral health issues, and also to provide them with more access to child and adolescent psychiatrists, licensed mental health behavioral professionals, and care navigators, all to assist the doctors and the families and helping everyone where they feel most comfortable, which is often first with their doctor. So we know this year's created additional mental health challenges for youth and families due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that families have struggled with childcare, virtual schooling, personal safety with the virus, economic insecurity, and the continued demands of work and family life. And so with that in mind, we have chosen resilience in the times of adversity and uncertainty as our theme for this year's Children's Mental Health Awareness Day recognition and celebration. Unfortunately, we're still unable to host face-to-face events, so we decided to develop a series of 5 videos that will reflect our theme based on feedback we received directly from families last year on what they would like to see for Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. So here's a sample of the topics for you guys to enjoy. Nurturing family resilience through support and Formed Families Forward and the National Alliance of Mental Illness, or NAMI. Coping with uncertainty using mindfulness and yoga with Project Yoga of Richmond. Resilience, promoting the mental health of youth and young adults, presented by Youth Move at NAMI. Build your resilience in the face of crisis, presented by family and youth support partners and behavioral health professionals at Middle Peninsula Northern Neck CSB. And the impact of racial trauma and resilience, creating solutions, presented with Voices for Virginia's Children, Greater Richmond Scan, and Safe Haven Space. So we hope that you will find these videos helpful with practical strategies and solutions. Please share them as you would like and watch them at your convenience. And as always, we will continue to partner together to help our young people and families have the best opportunity for success and abundance in their lives. Thank you.
Right. Welcome to a roundtable discussion on building your resilience in the face of crisis. We're going to be focusing on crisis planning as a means to grow resiliency skills in youth and young adults. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves around the table here, or Zoom room, whatever. But we all come from the High Fidelity Wraparound workforce at the Middle Peninsula Northern Neck Community Services Board. I'm Karen Grabowski. I'm the intensive in-home coordinator at the CSB, and I oversee our intensive in-home therapists as well as our High Fidelity Wraparound workforce. So I'm just going to go around my screen in the order that you guys are and let you introduce yourselves. So Alexis, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name is Alexis Pinos. I am a youth support partner with the High Fidelity Wraparound workforce. And basically what that means is that I used my lived experience kind of growing up in the mental health system as a youth to support and advocate for the youth that I work with.
Thanks, Alexis. Sarah?
My name is Sarah McCarthy. I'm an intensive care coordinator. That is a long title for facilitator of the wraparound process. I'm the one that kind of makes sure that our plans are staying on track and everyone is still in the loop working on the family and the youth goals.
Thank you, Sarah. Dari?
Hello, good morning. My name is Dari Harrell. I'm a YSP with the Middle Peninsula Northern Neck Community Service Board. I'm a recent graduate from Norfolk State University with my bachelor's in psychology. And another thing that sets me apart with being a YSP is I also have lived experiences as well. And I just ensure that the youth's voice is heard and that they also have knowledge as they maneuver their way through the system of mental health.
Thanks, Dari. Jonathan?
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Aries. I'm a family support partner, and what I do is bring my lived experience as a parent of 3 sons, 2 of them who had very challenging years in working with families who find themselves in a similar situation.
Thanks, Jonathan. And McKenna?
Good morning, I'm McKenna Schilling. I'm also a youth support partner. So just like Alexis and Dari, I use my personal lived experience to support the youth I work with and amplify their voices and their choices. And big part of the reason I do the job is because I feel like I wish I had had something like this. And I think that's an important thing that people should know, so.
Yeah. Thank you, McKenna. All right, so we're here, again, talking about resiliency, especially during crisis, and why this was so important to talk about is really largely mental health can still be a difficult thing for youth, for families, for teachers, for many people to talk about. There can still be stigma attached to having some, mental health days that are less than, perfect. And yet it's really common. We all have mental well-being and mental health, which means we all have days that are better and some days that are worse. And being able to share that and talk about it and plan around those days that aren't so great really is important for youth and young adults, for families, for anyone, really. But just really wanted to start this conversation with this group of people in hopes that youth and families will find it helpful in order for them to start conversations in their own homes. For a long time, mental health, mental wellness wasn't really well defined. Even the idea of resilience it's like this thing that exists, but how do you really accomplish it? And so I'm just really hopeful that this discussion today can really start reducing stigma, encouraging conversations around planning for this, because we get that as a society. We understand the need for crisis plans. Kids practice fire drills in school. Why? Because we want to be well prepared. And we don't reserve that just for school systems who might be in California where wildfires are common. Like, every school system practices this. And so the same can be true for crisis planning for kids and young adults, families. You don't have to reserve this process just for youth with mental health diagnoses or known depression and anxiety. These conversations, these plans can be useful for everyone. And so the same principles apply as the principles for planning for a fire drill, planning for a natural disaster. So this group is just going to bring you some great conversation. It's a group of professionals. And again, some of that is the profession of having lived experience, and really just spend some time opening our eyes to the benefits of crisis planning and the resiliency skills that can really be enhanced when quality crisis planning happens. So yeah, I just want to be able to have that discussion about mental health, mental well-being, and resiliency. Sarah, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I was going to ask while I'm hearing you talking, I'm like, what even is resiliency? Like, we know the definition of it. We know that it's being strong and having the ability to overcome like challenging times and being strong through that. But how do we get resilience? It's not just something that we wake up with one day. It's not just something that like, oh, snap my fingers, I got it now. No, we talk about it like we're supposed to know how to get it, how to achieve it. And so it's not just something we have or we don't. It's something that we can build on. It's something that we grow those skills. And those skills include everything from like knowing how to ask for help, knowing how to have those communication skills with somebody to say, yeah, yep, not doing too hot today. It's about those critical thinking skills and even being aware of your triggers and sensing that. It's about knowing where to go and when to do it. So, but the other thing too, like you said, Karen, it's not just for people who have mental health diagnoses. It's not just for those big crisis behaviors. It can be everyday things. It can be what you as a child or your family identify as your crisis and your need for that day. Any plan around not being mentally well or emotionally well, it can be discussed and it can be talked about. But again, I think I continue to go back to resiliency is actually about building those skills. It is about continuing to grow yourself. I don't know. Anybody else have thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great to build on the fact that resiliency is taught, learned, and experienced. And because of that, like Sarah said, we don't just know how to do those things. And so instead, learning regulation through co-regulation creates a space for us to learn those critical thinking skills through practice, support, and encouragement, which is something super important to keep in mind as we continue to discuss the idea of resiliency through crisis.
Well, as Alexis has said, that the part about co-regulation, as a parent, it would have been very helpful as the challenges began to unfold for my family if I had understood that isolation is an issue to be dealt with. The cliche is it takes a village, to raise a child. But but you know, I'm a bilingual family support partner, and there's an expression in Spanish, no nacimos para sufrir ni sufrir a solas, which is we weren't born to suffer and we weren't born to suffer alone. And I think that this is something that I hope everybody takes away from this is we need a support network as parents and family members.
I definitely want to echo a lot of what everyone else has said. Jonathan said it takes a village. In my case, it took 2 villages, because just like anything else, resiliency is a skill, like Alexa said, that is practiced. I mean, I think of it like if you're lifting weights, if you're lifting the same like low weight, that doesn't really build a lot of skill, right? You know, so when you're challenged and when you're struggling is kind of where you build that skill set. And you know, when we're working, especially for me, when I'm working with youth, like one of the biggest things that I try to emphasize with them is knowing when to ask for help, not just how, but also when. That's a learned skill. And you know, if you've never struggled before, it's unfamiliar and it's hard to discern, oh, this is one of those times that I might need to call in extra support. And what help to ask for as well. I think that's a big part of what we do is asking those tough questions, and it's uncomfortable sometimes and it's challenging, but I think too, like being challenged makes us think. So that's also where we grow.
I think you guys are starting to highlight sometimes there's a temptation during crisis to hide, isolate, not let people see the struggles that we're having. And Jonathan and McKenna, I think what you're starting to talk about is if we're going to crisis plan, including people is so crucial because isolation simply adds more stress to an already stressful situation. So yeah, I can just really hear that importance of that being able to reach out and get support.
Just to touch on that, Karen, and with McKenna too, since she's a YSP and I am a YSP, just advocating for the youth, and we really aren't teaching the youth if we aren't incorporating them. Helping the youth express their feelings and themselves, and knowing that this is an adequate way of doing it is constructive to building that resiliency. And even discussing youth and people of color, families of color, you know, they're already marginalized and disadvantaged and are more likely to face inadequate access to support and even being represented by mental health providers or even in the mental health field. Just considering that, I think looking at the outcomes, and these can be based on the family's ethnic status, socioeconomic status, and for the face of resiliency to show, it's important for these families to have access to mental health services. And it's beneficial for youth who are experiencing those childhood adversities. I mean, this can look like parental incarceration, violence within the community, even parental instability. And it's important when considering mental health for youth and family of colors that the support system is knowledgeable on what that support can look like. I know within our team, we always, you know, what does this look like for you? And a big way to assist these families and, you know, youth of color is hitting onto that support system. I know we emphasize natural supports a lot and community involvement. And even having these services for not just one person in the family, just for everybody, youth and family, that voice and choice. And I know that our model, the High Fidelity Wrap model, does a great job of keeping that out there for the family and letting them know that this is a comfortable space to build that resiliency. So I just wanted to touch on that too.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dari. McKenna, I think you're still on mute. Yeah.
That's struggle. I love that Dari brought up natural supports because I do think that is such a crucial part of our process. You know, we're not going to be in place as a service forever. As much as we may adore the youth and the families that we work with, it's just not practical. And you know, especially with anybody who falls into like a minority group or a disadvantaged group. So, you know, when you're talking about, you know, people of color or LGBTQ youth, that's a huge struggle with a lot of the communities we work with. And having that natural support, or even sometimes for the kids that I work with, I'll call it chosen family. It's okay to choose who you want to support you. It's okay to ask those people to support you and to be there for you, and to emphasize, like, regardless of whatever else goes on, if there's somebody that you know you can rely on, that's an important piece, I think, for all mental health and overall well-being.
Yeah, so we've kind of gone from, hey, don't isolate, try not to isolate, right? Like, it's important that we know where to go, who to go to. And then expanding that to, you know, professional support is helpful, it's nice. And sometimes it's even more important to have that natural community, those neighbors, those friends, the extended family, church members, whoever you're connected with, that let's not ignore their role in our ability to build resilience and overcome. But those connections that are, you know, long-term and sustainable in the community have such an important role above and beyond mental health professionals. That whole role is separate and important in of itself. But there's this true benefit to being connected and accepted and understood in your family, in your community and society. Really matters.
And on that point, Karen, like that has me thinking about like old school safety plans of don't do this, don't self-harm, don't be that, you know, and it's kind of here's the plan, you had no say in it, put your name on this dotted line, instead of engaging the child who may be having these feelings or these thoughts, engaging the family who is witnessing this and trying to support the kid, as well as community people like who at your school is a good advocate for you or you feel supported by. How can we engage them in this process? And you've kind of heard us all talk about with the wraparound service that we provide. And with that, as the care coordinator, our team and one of my roles is to actually look at how do we prevent this? So before we even get to a place of crisis where not really sure what to do now, we have a plan in place that doesn't look at just responses, but it looks at, okay, how can we help you identify your triggers? How can we start to build that resiliency skill? It engages the child and the family. The plan at the end of the day by doing that is more individualized to that family, what they need, what their values are, what their culture is, like Dari said, by asking those questions of what does it look like for you, we really start to have a more concrete plan for this family. And again, the beauty of that is not just the family who's doing that, but they have this support from our team in engaging others who are going to help that child or that family during the time of crisis. And so there's that preventative aspect to it. There's also, all right, in the crisis, what are we going to do? How do we know that you're starting to calm down? How do we know how to support you during that moment? What does it look like for you? And then afterwards, how can we best respond to you in a way that is supportive, that isn't going to be shaming and blaming and punitive, but how is our reaction to you going to support you in that? So my wheels are just kind of turning about how to develop that effective crisis plan, but doing so collaboratively with the kid involved.
Yeah, I think it's important too, like when we begin to safety plan, like laying it out all out on the table, like knowing where to go to for support, who's able to provide what type of support, and how like each person is able to fill their time to improve their mental well-being, whether that's through exercising or doing different activities to create and strengthen those endorphins that make us happy or that like motivate us to do better. Those plans tend to be so much more effective and so much more successful in the long run. And it's really important to get whoever this crisis like safety plan is around, get their voice into it.
And I love that Alexis just brought that up, that, you know, that positive aspect. I think most people who work with or have kids know that generally speaking, when you tell a kid not to do something, they're going to want to do exactly that thing. And I think that's human nature. Like, I'm an adult, but I still sometimes have those moments. So, you know, when you tell somebody don't do X, Y, Z, they're going to fixate generally on X, Y, Z. So kind of engaging them to also think critically about what are the positives, what steps can I take? You know, and I tell the kids I work with all the time, like, you'll be an adult one day. This will just be all you. So how do we practice the skill? And, oh, well, this could be a good thing. Great, run with that. So, you know, really trying to stay on that positive, on that upswing versus that don't do this, it's bad. I think can be very helpful.
Well,
And
and go ahead, Sarah.
No, I was just gonna say, when we give kids that space, they tend to create and come up with some really amazing things that, like you said, McKenna, I'm an adult and I wouldn't even think about that, but it works for them. Given that space, they can come up with some of the most like amazing creative ideas that actually work. They work for them.
And as a therapist, I think it's so important that we respect what kids say. Like, if the person they want to reach out to is their grandparent, great, like, fantastic. I think sometimes we're like, no, call your therapist, call this person. Like, if I'm not the space and the place that you feel most comfortable and confident talking, and that's a part of who you are, or maybe your family culture to kind of solve problems within the family, okay, like, that's fine that it's not me. Let's not try to force a kid or a family into this, you must go in this direction and this is who you must reach out to. And to have them identify, like, this is the person that really helps me feel safe so that I can practice my resiliency skills. It's really hard to be resilient or focus on resiliency skills when you don't feel safe. Like, it just, they don't kind of mesh. It's not possible. And so really honoring and respecting what youth are saying about what they want to try, not don't go do this, don't go do that. This is what I want to try. This is who I want to be the person. Can we try that out? And being able to honor and respect that.
Yeah, as a parent, you know, what McKenna mentioned about positivity can be so hard to keep in mind. As a parent, I remember distinctly feeling that, yeah, our family was lurching from one crisis to another, one provider to another, without the benefit of a team. And so how do parents, how do young people maintain that positivity? And I believe firmly that it's in contact with others, constructing that team, that social network. And I think a key concept for people who are struggling to deal with bringing somebody perhaps who's outside, you know, why would I burden them with my stuff, is the concept of reciprocity. So if you're thinking, well, if the roles were reversed, you know, if someone I knew were in this situation, would I help them? And chances are most people would say, yes, I would do anything for that friend. And I think that's possibly a really good way to reconceptualize reaching out for help. In the context of a crisis plan, however, that probably means if I've identified that best friend that I would do anything for and they would do anything for me, to let them know that there is a crisis plan in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely being willing to take that risk, knowing who that person is, knowing that you would do it for them, right? Like, again, it goes back to some of that stigma that like, oh no, I don't want people to know what's going on in my house, but if something was happening at theirs, I'd be happy to help out. And it's like, if we're all living that way, then we're all keeping these secrets and hiding these potential areas of concern in our life that if we just leaned into each other and lean on each other, we might feel far more likely to feel capable and competent of overcoming it. And Jonathan, I've heard so many parents describe like, I'm either in crisis or I'm holding my breath until the next one. And I mean, what a terrible, uncomfortable place to live. Where what we're talking about is like, I've got a plan for crisis, so I can breathe because I know it's there and I know who's going to be there for me. And when we're in between big things, we're still growing skills, we're practicing, it almost makes learning these things a fun and exciting time, rather than terror of what's going to happen next and what's the next crisis and could it be tragic in nature. And that's just really hard for families.
I think one of the things I like most, excuse me, I'm sorry. One of the things I like most about High Fidelity Wrap is we have a tenet of no judging, blaming, or shaming. And everybody's voice is valid. And I think that that's a super important aspect, especially because, I mean, how many of us have shared a struggle with a friend or a family member or a coworker or whatever, and they've been like, oh, that's not really that bad, or, you know, try to minimize it. And that's, I think, so incredibly isolating. And it's like, well, why would I ask for help? Why would I ask for support if I'm being told I'm being silly? So I think too, like giving equal respect and you know, Karen was saying earlier, honoring everyone's voice, everyone's feelings, and respecting, like, they're telling their truth. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. They're telling their truth, and go with it. Just roll with it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I really like how you and Karen both emphasize the plan within the crisis prevention plan. And once you establish those supports, you know, within this plan, you might be planning for the crisis, of course, but you can also plan for what that support can look like. Some people take support different than others. You know, some people might feel like your support is great, and another person might feel like, you're being overbearing. So being able to establish that what support looks like within the crisis prevention plan can help a tons. And I know sometimes within conversations, within, you know, even talking to the youth and family, or maybe within that family unit, there may be times of shaming and blaming. And to establish that, you know, no shaming, no blaming, and plans fail, families don't fail. We're able to establish that support. So if the youth is in the meeting and, you know, what support looks like for me is being able to reach out to you, you know, not you bombarding me with all of this support that might be overwhelming. I think that that's a good way to start and a good way to give that support to the family or the youth or whoever needs it at the time.
Yeah, Dari, it's funny because, you know, for some young adults, teenagers, even kids, like time and space is something they need to start reflecting or building resiliency skills. And for other kids, that's a red flag. That's oh gosh, my kid's separated, isolated. That's a sign that I really need to be checking in on them. And so really being able to talk openly with your child about what is this thing here? When you go to your room, what's that about? And again, allowing your child that space to say, no, it's really helpful to me. I get my thoughts together and then I'm not so angry. Or, you know, giving your child the space and a safe place to say, no, I actually get really lonely back there. And start having some pretty sad thoughts and I really do need someone to come check on me. But like recognizing that support and what's helpful is very dependent on each kid, and being curious, right? Like not just assuming, oh my gosh, they're locked in their room, it's terrible, it's awful. Like being able to go in with curiosity and being able to ask questions and being able to openly talk with kids about what's happening and what's helpful.
And that kind of goes back to the narrative of asking those questions, like Dari hinted at earlier, like, what does that look for you? What's happening? What's going on? And leaving it open without that shame and blame response. Instead of asking, what's wrong with you? Why do you go back there and do that? What is that all about? It's about how I think you approach the situation in that non-judgmental way and allowing the kid the space to respond and be heard and be understood.
Yeah, as a parent, it seemed that I was slow to come to the realization that plans fail, not families, in my own case. And there is a lot of stigma, obviously, associated with psychiatric disorders, mental health challenges, and so on. And I remember there was a church service that I attended in which the pastor was talking about smart recovery in hopes that the congregation would embrace this as an adjunct to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she asked the congregation, raise your hand if anybody in your family or someone you care about has been struggling with substance abuse. And I bet 90% of the people in that congregation raised their hand. And I think it's the same thing with mental health. And we tend to believe that it's only us, that everybody else is going about their lives just fine and they don't have any challenges. And I'm betting that that's not the case.
Yeah. No, statistically speaking, Jonathan, you're correct. There's a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and it statistically, more kids than not, more grown-ups than not, when they were kids, had adverse experiences. And when you've had adversity, it can impact your ability to have some of those resiliency skills, know what emotions are and how to tolerate them and where to go for safe support. Where to go to feel a sense of safety. So yeah, I mean, the statistics are there to back up your experience with, oh my gosh, who would have known so many people are dealing with challenges around mental well-being, around substance use, around just generally being able to cope with day-to-day stress. And I think there's been a collective concern. I think one of the reasons we're having this conversation is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? There's been this huge collective stress this past year, and fortunately, highlights on mental well-being. People finally being able to talk about like, oh gosh, there's this big thing going on, and that impacts how we feel. It's like, yes, this has been happening. At a lower level, this is a global, stressor, but this has been happening at a family unit level, at a community level, at a societal level for a long time. And so, again, just acknowledging and realizing these conversations are so important for everyone, regardless, because again, just like we all have physical well-being, we all have mental well-being. And so I think going back to that statement of plans fail, not families, the piece I want to highlight there is that it really is part of being resilient is being able to enter every interaction, every situation with this understanding and knowledge that people are doing the best they can. People are doing the best they can with the skills, the resources, the tools, the knowledge that they have at that moment. And it isn't a choice. It isn't necessarily, I just want to be a bad kid. Like, I don't know kids out there that really just want that. There's always something underneath it. There's always a skill or a tool or a resource that's lacking. And so when we can come in and really just view, okay, this thing happened, this moment, this crisis behavior, this crisis situation, and what do we do about that? Like, we couldn't avoid it this time, but how do you actually implement this idea of non-shaming, non-blaming? How do we formulate responses that are actually building resilience?
It's so important too to like remember to lean on the lessons learned when plans fail. And with that comes revisiting the plans that we make, making changes that change with the culture and the strengths of each individual, practicing the skills in each safety plan, and especially when, you know, there are things that change and there's crises in between, but you don't learn skills in crisis. You definitely learn them outside of that.
Yeah. So I love that, Alexis. I love the idea of, all right, we had this plan to avoid, I don't know, we can use something common like self-harm, right? We had this plan, it didn't work, but what did we learn from it? Maybe we learned a new trigger. Maybe we learned a new sign that you're starting to think about harming yourself. Like, how do we take a situation and let it educate us moving forward? That's resiliency. Like that's it in a nutshell. Like it's what do you do with this information? And then you're highlighting some science in there too, Alexis. There's science that says when we're in crisis, you're in a very emotional survival kind of place. Really thinking and learning, that part of your brain isn't really connected. It's there, but it's really not connected. And so it's another piece of building resilience and the importance of crisis planning to build resilience is practicing those skills when you're calm, when you're not in a crisis, when you have a sense of safety around you, that you practice journaling, that you practice whatever replacement kind of behavior, that you're practicing how you share emotions and how you use I feel statements, because they're not going to come naturally when you're in the middle of a crisis. When we're in a crisis, we go back to what we know and we do what felt comfortable, even if it doesn't seem the healthiest for people. And so I love those points, Alexis.
I think resiliency too is much so muscle memory. And so the more you practice it outside of a crisis, the more it comes to you naturally. And the easier it becomes to kind of lean on all of those skills that you've learned along the way.
Yeah.
And like while you're saying that, I'm just thinking, I know we've touched on like the stigma around mental health, but you think about like when kids growing up, all the things that they have to learn and they absorb, like riding a bike or learning how to write or like the math problems, right? There's no judgment or shame and blame when kids get that wrong. It's, oh, get back up, try again. And that I think is the approach that kind of needs to be taken with our crisis plans of, oh, okay, well, you said we were going to try that, didn't quite work, but what else could we try to continue that process moving forward? And again, it's like the plans fail, the child and the family don't. And how can we take those lessons learned and continue to revisit and revise and edit so that it doesn't feel stigmatizing to talk about it? It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if you fail as you're working on these resiliency skills, but it shouldn't be stigmatized. It shouldn't be judged or shamed or blamed.
And Sarah, you bring up a great point, because kids have to feel safe to make mistakes. Like there's a reason you don't start with a test on a math skill. You start with practicing it in the classroom, you get homework assignments, you have all these safe opportunities to make mistakes before you go sit for a test. Where is that for emotional skills? Where is that for behavioral skills, right? Like, where is that safe space to really learn how to calm yourself, how to identify your emotions? And so that's, I think, why we're talking about crisis planning isn't necessarily big things. You can crisis plan around how to teach your child emotional, language and skills, like really thinking through this as much bigger than just saving crisis planning for like huge, major, potentially catastrophic things, and really broadening our thought process to how do we do a lot of this good prevention work? How do we use crisis plans that are preventative in nature?
I'm a big believer in failing safely. We all have to practice failing, just like when you first start doing gymnastics or dance, they make you practice falling, or there's a bunch of different examples. And I think too, an important aspect of that is celebrating the wins amongst the struggles, because just because it wasn't an overall success does not negate there may have been minor successes, there may have been minor wins, and recognizing those and celebrating those, and also just, hey, high five, you were able to communicate that this wasn't working. That's really important.
It is. And I think it's hard, and Jonathan, you might be able to speak to this. I think sometimes it's hard as a parent, when you're living it day to day, feels so intense sometimes. But really trying to notice, like, oh, we went a couple days longer without this thing happening, or I saw you work hard for those 15 minutes before you lost your cool, whereas typically you lose your cool right away. Like, really taking the time to see that can be hard when you're living and breathing it every day. It feels really overwhelming.
And when you're alone.
Yes.
This is the value of your social network, your team, whatever you want to call it, because once again, as a parent, it can feel like one desperate situation after another, and it's very difficult to spot those successes. That's an additional value of having, your friend, your support network being able to point those things out to you and remind you that, yeah, you've done this before, you can do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something that I've always been told, like, we're all doing the best we can, and as we learn, as we grow, we can learn to be better and do better. And I think that's something that's really important to remember as, we crisis plan, as we build our resiliency, like, not all days are perfect, and we're all doing the best we can.
I think, Alexis, that's such a key piece to that, like, response idea of like, oh, we couldn't avoid the crisis this time, but that balance of highlighting and being proud of successes that did happen, and the accountability. Like, it now that we know some of this information, we're going to keep expecting us to do better and better and better, and that's okay. Like, continuing to have expectations and gently challenge ongoing growth is important. And it's important to make sure that there's the support network that actually is helping with the growth, that we're not just looking at people and saying, grow. Well, if I knew how, like, wouldn't I already be doing it? And so that, I think, is relevant for anyone who's working with a kid or young adult.
And I was going to say too, I think, with my work as the facilitator of this process, I'm very glad to have my YSPs and FSPs with me to really support the families, so that I can kind of start to have some of these tough conversations with other providers, whether that be, court services, social services, the school, other mental health providers, about supporting the family and recognizing those little wins, those small successes. And so I had this one youth that I served who when he got emotionally dysregulated, his crisis was to say, I'm going to kill myself, or I shouldn't be alive. I want to die. And he had a history of being hospitalized. I think at that time, the school staff were very concerned about his safety. And so when we were all able to come in and sit down and ask those questions of, okay, teacher, okay, school counselor, okay, child, okay, caregiver, what do you see right before it happens? What's going on from your perspective? What's happening? We were able to uncover that. No, that statement wasn't true. It was a shame response. He that was the thing that he said. And by everyone being on the same page and knowing how to respond and recognizing those triggers and listening to him, he was able to quickly calm down. He de-escalated himself quickly. You know, the school didn't have to take an extra step to call, you know, emergency services or the police, or, you know, we prevented additional hospitalizations. And so there is this importance of getting everyone involved, not just youth and family, but I continue to go back to who else is involved with this kid, who else has their hands in the pot, and hearing their perspective is also important too, making sure that they're a part of the process and the planning. And so that's one success that I've seen over the past year and a half in this position. But I mean, I'm curious to know if anybody else has seen those small wins, whether that be with the youth or the family or other providers that we work with.
I love that you brought that up, Sarah, because I think it's such an important point, like really super important. And for me, like working directly with youth that we work with, like I do think there's a huge, just indescribable value in having somebody who is just your person to talk to, even if it's not in like a therapeutic sense or a clinical sense. You know, when you're talking about something like a crisis plan, there's already going to be a lot of shame around it. But getting everyone to come to the table with an open, honest, truly just here it all is kind of perspective, I think having that one person that you're like, hey, I'm going to tell you everything, and know that person isn't going to go around and tell everybody. They're still going to let you have your own voice, but they're going to help you process, or, you know, maybe encourage you to say, hey, like maybe it's not so out of the box that you share this in this meeting. I think that's a really important aspect. And I think too, that's part of what makes crisis planning so effective. The way we do it is everyone has an opportunity to speak independently and privately, and then they all come to the table. And I think that's just, it gives everyone that, like, I said this and the world didn't explode. It's okay. And they can say it again.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, you know, again, like I said, the school was able to provide their input. And by all having like a succinct way of responding to this, not only did this child's crisis de-escalate, but the schools did as well. And his home life de-escalated too. And it was just beautiful to see, you know, those statements of, I want to harm myself turn into, I just need to talk to you about this. And he recognized that support and was able to voice what he needed. But the other aspect of that too is all operating like in the same way, all responding in one supportive, non-judgmental way. Granted, it's a process. You know, I think we've said it's not going to change overnight, you know, but we have to recognize those small wins. And at this point now, he's doing great. So I really do think that there is an importance of crisis planning, but doing so collaboratively with everyone involved.
And Sarah, as a provider, really understanding, being willing to hear. I mean, I've had parents come to me and say, I actually felt judged by this thing you said last week. And so, you know, I don't think any system partners, any providers, mental health, juvenile justice courts, DSS, I mean, anybody, I don't think any of us go into a situation thinking, yes, I want to go make this youth or family feel bad about what's happening. Unfortunately, though, I think it happens unintentionally and accidentally a lot. And Jonathan, I think I've heard you speak to that, like, fear of judgment as a parent, and how sometimes that, and even that fear starts to that process of isolation.
Well, yeah, the what I've seen in my work with families is this is the most common feeling about parents, embarrassment, that not wanting to put their, wash their dirty laundry in public, that sort of thing. And where I've seen families progress in this is when they have a crisis prevention plan. That when that happens, they start to discover things such as their strengths that they have, and that and it's those strengths that support resilience, in my opinion, and in the experience of some of my families as well.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, that having a crisis prevention plan and talking some of those things out is a great way to build on the skills that the family already has. It's a great way to incorporate, the things that the youth is good at and is comfortable with. And what, if mom who's involved in this crisis plan is excellent at communicating, then how can we incorporate that into this crisis plan? Or if the kid is creative, instead of doing X, Y, and Z, how can we incorporate their creative strengths into this plan? Continuously building on those, I think, is only going to make them stronger,
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah, and I really liked how you touched on including, and also within those crisis prevention plans, also being culturally competent. These crisis prevention plans, often we adapt them. We, make sure that this is something that the family and youth can do without us. I know our motto is to do for, do with, and to cheer on. And we might start with doing for and then move into doing with. And I think the more that we incorporated being culturally competent, the more that they are for doing it, on their own. When they advance and grow out of services, they might look at this plan and say, I can float with this. This sounds like something that the family, the youth, we all can do, instead of looking at something and thinking, this isn't even something I would do in a million years. So it's building that, within those plans. And even as they grow out of services, they're able to provide, make their own plans that can be incorporated into their households and within their families, and, just growing from there and incorporating those crisis prevention plans within their own cultures. So I think that's really important too.
So with our last 5-10 minutes, we've been talking so much about resiliency and how it's skills and it's resources and it's knowledge and it's tools and it's the ability to build this. So I guess the two things I want to kind of end on is what are some concrete things that youth families can take away from this? What's our biggest messages as to where to start this process? And then I want to end with some ideas on resources for people who are looking to build maybe their support networks or build their knowledge of resilience. So how does a parent or a caregiver start a discussion around mental well-being with a child? What are some concrete things we can throw out there for families?
Well, the thing that comes to mind right off the bat is the concept of collaborative problem solving, in which the essence, of course, is no shaming or blaming, but engaging the young person in a conversation in which there has been a behavior, and then the parent says, "What's up with that?" at the right time, not during the crisis. Right? And I think that the information, once again, looking at families that I've worked with and in my own family, that has been really very, very helpful.
Yeah. So really encouraging families, as soon as they see something, a behavior, an emotional state, something that seems maybe a little bit off from what's typical for their kid, to be able to say, hey, what's that about? What's going on there? And to be able to encourage that emotional exploration, that like mental well-being exploration, that's okay. It's okay to say, I'm not having a great day, or I don't know, I'm just thinking really negative, that those things are okay to talk about in our family.
I think too, as being the person who has been the kid, having a parent come to the kid in a more understanding, compassionate way, being more curious rather than shaming and blaming of like, why would you be doing this? Why are you isolating? Or rather than trying to understand like what this kid is really going through, I think can be a really helpful step to opening that door and allowing the kids to come to you when they're ready.
And one of the things that I would say with that, Alexis, is after having that conversation, allow space for feedback. Because again, like Karen mentioned earlier, we don't come in with the intention of shaming and blaming, but we're only human and we could make mistakes, or this individual could perceive things differently. And so allowing that space for the kid or whomever it is to just say, yeah, that didn't feel very supportive, so that you guys can continue to grow moving forward. That's one thing that I would encourage. But again, always try to be understanding in a non-judgmental kind of way.
Yeah.
Those are both really important points. And one of the things I use with the kids I work with is it should be us versus the problem, not me versus you. So I think too, like allowing that like remembering to approach things as, maybe you're concerned or you're worried or you're afraid or, but sometimes it could come out in a different way or be perceived in a different way. So maybe like remembering like there's a huge difference between, oh my gosh, why do you do this? And hey, I'm really worried about you. This is a concerning behavior. Can we talk about it? Like there's a huge difference in the response you're gonna get. So I think remembering like, and like Sarah was saying, I think allowing that space and that open-mindedness of like hearing the response and feedback that may come with that response.
And my quick skill or tip would be, even before there's a behavior, are we educating kids on mental well-being and mental health? Are we making it okay to talk about, hey, feeling sad sometimes, feeling worried sometimes, these are things that happen to everybody, and being direct about really tough conversations, right? It isn't always easy to talk about, have you ever had thoughts of suicide? And yes, I've worked with far too many kids who said, I never talked about it because I didn't know if it was something I could talk about. I didn't know if it was something my parents would understand. I didn't know if they would just freak out and label me as, whatever. And so to go ahead and really have some of those direct, open, respectful, I want to know, I want your sense of emotional safety to be high, even before you see a problem, to just generally talk about, there's this thing called mental well-being, there's this thing called mental health, and we all have it. We all have it. So let's not be worried to talk about it here.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as the conversation begins is to put it into writing. Far too often, once we get into crisis mode, we kind of forget everything we already talked about. So if it's in a plan, if it's in writing, then it's a place of reflection, and it's something that you can go to be like, okay, this is what we talked about. This is what I do first. And this is who I can contact. This is who's there for what, like everything. It's just so much easier to kind of reflect rather than trying to remember it all in the moment.
Yep. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was saying. But I wanted to add too, make it fun. I mean, crisis planning, it's an intense conversation, right? But like, if your child's favorite color is blue, put it on blue paper. Or like, I had one family who this girl loved Hannah. So like, there was a picture of Hannah Montana somewhere on one of her documents. So make it fun, make it individualized. And the other thing too that I was going to highlight is like, I remember in school, right as you walk out of the door of the classroom, there's the fire safety, like evacuation plan. So put this plan somewhere that your child, your family, natural supports who come to visit your house, if you're comfortable with that, can see it. It's somewhere so that, you know, when and if the family gets to a point of crisis, it's not something that you have to go digging for. It's pretty easily accessible.
Sarah, I love that you brought up that, like, if your kid's favorite color is blue, because like for me, I have an aunt and uncle who I call my second parents, and you know, they used to have those tough conversations while doing an activity I loved. For me, it was like, I love to cook. So I would be like mandated to help with cooking dinner. And I'd be like, you know, and, you know, come down and we'd have those conversations because I had something else going on that I could kind of be more comfortable with. And I think that kind of helped alleviate some of that, like somebody staring at you and like asking you these intense questions. And I would also say too, like just being mindful of the discourse around the crisis and mental health in general. Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of times like very well-meaning people, whoever, may, you know, out of concern or fear, make comments that can be perceived a little bit harshly. You know, if you're struggling with something and you hear someone say like something negative about somebody else who's struggling, you're not going to be as willing to be forthcoming. So I think too, like protecting that space is a really important thing, so that if, say for example, you have a crisis plan and it's not working, okay, great, then your kid should, or whoever should feel comfortable coming to the table and saying, I don't feel like this is working and here's why. That makes it that much more effective.
Yeah. I think one last tidbit of information, one last skill or thing before we talk about our favorite resources for building resiliency or supports. Remembering to take care of yourself. And that's for every member of the family, but especially parents. Really remembering that, you know, one of the best examples you can set for your child who may start to demonstrate some concerns around their own mental well-being is to show them, I can take care of my mental well-being, that I've got the skills and the knowledge and the tools to do some self-care, to really prioritize my mental well-being. Because it's a really hard sell to tell a kid, hey, take care of yourself, be safe, make safe choices, if I'm so stressed out and like, you know, not capable of managing because of stress. And so really being that role model of caring for your own mental well-being, not just for your own benefit, like that's important enough as it is, but also your kid who you're worried about is watching, and they're going to pick up on what's, you know, going on even more so than maybe what you say to your kid. So, all right. Really great discussion. Really appreciate all of you guys just being here and so open and willing to talk about this. Where do people go if they need information on overcoming adversities, building resilience, building support networks for minorities, for marginalized groups? Where do we go? What do we do?
Well, the first acronym that comes to mind is NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. I've attended many sessions myself and found it to be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I definitely think another resource could be the Virginia Family Network, as well as Youth Move. Youth Move is great for peer-led support groups for youth and young adults.
Yep.
Situation specific. The Trevor Project is an amazing resource really for all youth, but they specifically focus on LGBTQ youth. PFLAG is a great one for adults and family members who are maybe have questions or want support, as well as the Family Project and RAIN, which is RAINN. I had struggles with that earlier. So they're a great resource if that's a needed resource.
Yeah. Very nice.
And for Spanish-speaking families, SAMHSA, which is SAMHSA, has a lot of information in Spanish language for parents.
Yeah. One of my favorites is the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Has wonderful resources. So like we've talked some about prevention, but like, especially if you know gone through a really tough thing, they've witnessed violence at school, they've experienced some kind of grief or loss, like the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a like handout on any, I mean, they have more information there and handouts than I've ever seen in my entire life. And so if you feel like your child has gone through something that has the potential to be traumatic or just really, really hard and full of some grief and loss, there's some wonderful resources there in terms of just how to support kids through that kind of stuff. Any others? All right. Well, there will be links to our resources, and if we continue to come up with some more, we'll put them in there attached to this video. And so that will be available to everyone who's watched this. And I really just want to thank the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services and Virginia Tech for putting this together and giving us this space to have this conversation. I thank each one of you guys for talking so openly today. I just really think the more we can talk openly about mental well-being, the more likely we are to be able to have some prevention plans and crisis plans that are supportive and really do build resiliency for all youth throughout Virginia. So super exciting conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.